The Dauntless trembled under the relentless barrage of zenith firepower. Sparks flew across the bridge as the ship's energy shields faltered, leaving the crew exposed to every jolt and shudder. Lieutenant Commander Elena Drake stood firm at the command console, her knuckles white as she gripped its edge. Around her, the bridge was a cacophony of urgent voices and alarm klaxons. "Shields at 12%, Commander!" Ensign Grant's voice cracked with panic. Elena didn't flinch. "Reroute power from secondary systems. Pull it from life support if you have to. We don't need air if we're dead." Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She turned her steely gaze to the main viewport, where Zenith's flagship, Primordial, loomed like a predator ready to strike the final blow. A voice boomed through the ship's intercom, cold and disdainful. "Humans, your resistance is futile. Earth has surrendered, and your survival hinges on compliance. Lay down your arms." Elena sneered. The voice belonged to High Executor Zalcor, the Zenith's infamous military strategist. His tone carried an infuriating mix of smugness and finality. She keyed the comm panel and responded. "This is Lieutenant Commander Elena Drake of the Dauntless. If you think this is surrender, you clearly don't understand humans." There was a pause, as if Zalcor was deciding whether her defiance was worth acknowledging. "A primitive species bravado," he replied, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your defiance is amusing, but it will achieve nothing." Elena cut the channel, her jaw tight. "Grant, keep feeding me status updates. Martinez, ready evasive maneuvers on my mark. Jackson, get me tactical scans of their fleet. I want their weaknesses." She moved like a force of nature, her commands crisp and decisive. Her crew snapped to action, their trust in her unwavering despite the impossible odds. At the rear of the bridge, Chief Engineer Halverson appeared, his uniform smudged with grease and his face grim. "Commander, I don't mean to pile on, but we've got 10 minutes tops before the reactor's containment fails. The Zenith's ion pulses are tearing us apart." Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to the tactical station, where Jackson worked furiously. "What about their protocols? Anything unusual?" "Actually, yes," Jackson said, his voice rising with a spark of hope. "Their war doctrines are archaic. Found something in their rules of engagement. They've got this concept called Rule Number 1. Elena's brow furrowed. "Explain." Jackson tapped a few keys, pulling up Zenith data they'd stolen months ago. "Rule Number 1. Subjugation is voided if an opposing force demonstrates an unbreakable will. It's symbolic, rooted in their cultural pride. They'd rather retreat than face an adversary who refuses to yield." For the first time in hours, a glimmer of opportunity appeared in Elena's eyes. "So they're bound by their own ego. That's our opening." She stepped closer to the viewport, her mind racing. "They think we're beaten. Let's show them how wrong they are." "Commander, with all due respect," Halverson interjected, "we're barely holding this ship together. How do we convince them we've got anything left?" Elena turned to face her crew, her voice steady and firm. "Not with brute force. With ingenuity. They expect us to fold under pressure, to act predictably. But humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt." She pointed to Jackson. "Get me a clean comm channel to Zalcor. Let's poke the bear." Seconds later, the Zenith strategist's visage appeared on the main screen, his elongated features inscrutable but his posture relaxed. He was utterly convinced of his impending victory. "Ah, the defiant Commander Drake," Zalcor said, his tone almost amused. "Have you called to beg for mercy?" Elena smiled, cold and sharp. "I called to remind you of Rule Number 1. For the first time, Zalcor's calm exterior wavered. "What do you know of our doctrines?" "Enough to understand that you've already lost," Elena said, her voice unwavering. "You see, Executor, humanity doesn't break. You can bombard us, starve us, and tear our cities apart, but you will never take away what makes us human. And by your own laws, that means you're the ones who must retreat." Zalcor leaned forward, his expression darkening. "You presume to lecture me on Zenith tradition? You're a desperate insect clinging to survival. Elena shrugged. Maybe. But even an insect can bite. She cut the feed before he could respond, turning back to her crew. Now we make him believe it. The bridge buzzed with renewed energy as Elena outlined her plan. The Dauntless would feign critical damage, drawing the Zenith fleet into a carefully laid trap. Using the ship's last reserves of power, they would broadcast a powerful electromagnetic pulse to disable Zenith's sensors. In the chaos, they'd execute a daring maneuver to strike the primordial and escape. As the minutes ticked by, the crew worked with a singular focus. Halverson and his engineers rerouted power from non-essential systems, while Jackson and Grant coordinated targeting solutions. Elena remained a steady presence, guiding her team with precision and encouragement. Martinez, she said, placing a hand on the pilot's shoulder. This maneuver has to be perfect. No pressure. Martinez grinned despite the sweat on his brow. Pressure's my middle name, Commander. Finally, everything was in place. Elena stood at the center of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the viewport. On my mark, execute the pulse. Martinez, take us in close. Let's show them what humanity's made of. The pulse fired, and the lights dimmed as the ship's systems strained under the surge. On the screen, Zenith vessels faltered, their movements erratic. Martinez pushed the ship into a daring spiral, bringing the Dauntless dangerously close to the primordial. Now! Elena shouted. The ship's remaining torpedoes streaked toward the Zenith flagship, striking its shields in a dazzling explosion. While the damage was superficial, the psychological impact was profound. The primordial drifted, momentarily stunned, as the Dauntless veered away. We're clear! Martinez called, triumph in his voice. Elena allowed herself a brief smile. Good work, everyone. Let's get the hell out of here. As the ship limped toward the safety of a nearby asteroid field, Elena knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had taken its first step in defying Zenith, and she intended to make sure it wouldn't be the last. The Dauntless drifted into the shadow of a massive asteroid, its hull battered and blackened from the skirmish. Inside, the tension was palpable as the crew scrambled to repair systems and regroup. Lieutenant Commander Elena Drake paced the bridge, her sharp eyes scanning the damage reports scrolling across multiple displays. The hum of emergency lights cast the room in a harsh, red glow. Status report, Elena called, her voice steady despite the chaos. Ensign Grant, still sweating from the earlier confrontation, glanced up from his console. Shields are down. We've got minimal propulsion and limited power to weapons. Reactor stability is holding, but barely. Elena's jaw tightened. She turned to Chief Engineer Halverson, who was frantically working on a panel. Halverson, what's the timeline for getting us combat ready? Realistically? Hours, he said, not looking up. But I can give you basic shields and partial thrusters in 20 minutes if you're willing to risk another meltdown. Elena nodded. Do it. We don't have hours. As the engineer dashed off, Jackson approached with a tablet in hand. Commander, I've been going through Zenith's communication logs from their fleet. They're rattled. That torpedo strike on the primordial shook their confidence. Elena raised an eyebrow. How rattled? Enough that they're debating their next move. It's clear they didn't expect us to put up this much of a fight. Some of their captains are questioning Zalcor's strategy. A faint smile played on Elena's lips. Good. We just need to push a little harder. Divide their ranks, and their cohesion falls apart. She gestured for Jackson to follow her to the strategy table. Start compiling a list of their captains. Prioritize the ones most likely to rebel. If we can sow dissent, we can force their hand. Martinez, the ship's pilot, swiveled in his chair to face her. Commander, I've been thinking. If we can draw them into the asteroid field, we could use the terrain to our advantage. Force them into smaller groups where their numbers won't matter as much. Elena nodded thoughtfully. It's risky, but it's better than facing their fleet head-on. Good thinking, Martinez. Prepare a flight path. The crew worked tirelessly, the bridge alive with purposeful energy. Despite their exhaustion, There was a spark of determination in every movement. Elena's leadership had reignited their hope, and they clung to it like a lifeline. 20 minutes later, Halverson returned, wiping grease from his hands. Shields and thrusters are online. It's not pretty, but it'll hold. That's all I need, Elena said, turning to the comm station. Grant, open a channel. Let's poke the bear again. The bridge quieted as Zalkor's image appeared on the main screen. He looked as composed as ever, but Elena could see the tension in his eyes. Commander Drake, he greeted, his tone laced with disdain. Have you called to accept the inevitable? Not quite, Elena replied, her voice cool. I wanted to thank you for showing us your weaknesses. You see, for all your technological superiority, you've underestimated the human spirit. That's going to cost you. Zalkor's expression hardened. You're grasping at straws. Your defiance is nothing more than a fleeting annoyance. Elena leaned forward, her gaze piercing. Then why haven't you finished us off? Could it be that you're afraid of what we'll do next? The screen went dark as Zalkor ended the transmission, but the seed had been planted. Elena turned to her crew, a spark of satisfaction in her eyes. That'll keep him guessing. Martinez, take us into the asteroid field. Let's see how well they handle the terrain. The Dauntless weaved through the dense asteroid belt, its thrusters firing in short bursts to navigate the treacherous terrain. The Zenith fleet hesitated at the edge of the field, their larger ships struggling to find a clear path. They're holding back, Jackson reported. Looks like they're worried about damaging their ships. Perfect, Elena said. Let's use that to our advantage. Martinez, keep us moving. Grant, monitor their movements. I want to know the moment they split up. Minutes stretched into tense silence as the Dauntless darted between asteroids, its crew holding their breath with every narrow escape. Then, Grant's voice broke through the quiet. Commander, they're splitting up. 3 ships are entering the field from different angles. Elena's eyes lit up. That's our opening. Target the closest ship and prepare to engage. Martinez, keep us in cover until we're in range. The Dauntless crept closer to the nearest Zenith vessel, a frigate that was clearly struggling to navigate the field. Elena waited until they were within striking distance before giving the order. Fire! The ship's remaining weapons roared to life, tearing through the frigate's shields and punching holes in its hull. The enemy ship erupted in a fiery explosion, and the bridge erupted in cheers. That's one down, Elena said, her voice steady. Let's keep them on their toes. Martinez, take us to the next target. The battle continued, the Dauntless using the asteroids for cover as it picked off the isolated Zenith ships one by one. Elena's strategy was paying off, and the tide was slowly turning in their favor. As the last enemy ship retreated from the asteroid field, the crew of the Dauntless allowed themselves a moment of relief. But Elena knew the fight was far from over. She stood at the center of the bridge, her gaze fixed on the viewport. We've won this round, but they'll be back, she said, her voice firm. Prepare for the next engagement. This isn't over until we've made them regret ever underestimating us. The crew nodded, their resolve stronger than ever. For the first time in weeks, they felt like victory was within reach. And with Elena Drake leading the charge, they knew humanity's spark of defiance would burn brighter than ever. The Dauntless emerged from the asteroid field like a predator stalking its prey. The Zenith fleet, shaken and fragmented, hung at the edges of the debris field, hesitant to advance. On the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Elena Drake stood tall, her sharp eyes fixed on the tactical display. The moment of reckoning had arrived. Jackson, status on the Primordial? She asked, her tone crisp. Shields at 40%, weapons systems still fully operational, Jackson replied. But their maneuvering has slowed. Looks like Zalkor is holding back to regroup his forces. Typical, Elena muttered. He's too proud to admit he's rattled. Let's give him a reason to doubt. She turned to Ensign Grant. Open a channel. Let's talk to the good executor one more time. The Zenith leader's face flickered onto the main screen, his alien features tense but composed. Elena smirked, sensing the cracks beneath his calm facade. Commander Drake, Zalcor greeted, his voice cool. I hope you've enjoyed your brief respite. It ends now. Elena chuckled softly. You keep saying that, and yet here we are still standing. Tell me, Executor, how does it feel to be outmaneuvered by what you consider a primitive species? His eyes narrowed. Your insolence will be your undoing. I have already won, you simply delay the inevitable. I think we both know that's not true. Elena shot back. You're bound by rule number 1, Zalcor. Humanity's will is unbroken, and by your own laws, this fight is already over. All that remains is for you to admit it. Zalcor's composure faltered for a split second, but it was enough. Elena seized the moment. Here's what's going to happen, she continued, her voice sharp and commanding. You're going to order your fleet to stand down and retreat. If you don't, we'll take the Primordial out of commission, and you'll lose everything. Your choice. Zalcor's face twisted with a mix of anger and uncertainty. Before he could respond, Elena cut the feed, her attention snapping back to her crew. Martinez, bring us into striking range of the Primordial. Halverson, prep the main weapons. Let's make them sweat. The Dauntless accelerated toward the heart of the Zenith fleet, its battered hull a testament to humanity's resilience. The Primordial loomed larger with every passing second, its sleek, alien design bristling with weaponry. The air on the bridge was thick with tension as the crew prepared for the final confrontation. Incoming fire! Jackson called out as the Primordial opened fire. Evasive maneuvers! Elena barked. Martinez jerked the controls, sending the ship into a sharp roll. Energy beams streaked past, close enough to make the hull groan but missing their mark. Shields holding at 20%, Grant reported, his voice tight. Elena clenched her fists. They couldn't take much more punishment, but they didn't need to. Halverson, status on the main cannon? Charged and ready, the engineer replied. Good. Martinez, bring us around for a clear shot. Jackson, target their propulsion systems. Let's see how they like being stranded. The Dauntless swung into position, its main cannon aligning with the Primordial's engines. Elena watched the tactical display, her heart pounding as the targeting reticle locked on. Fire! She commanded. The ship shuddered as the cannon unleashed a brilliant beam of energy. It struck the Primordial squarely in its aft section, punching through its shields and slamming into its propulsion systems. Explosions rippled across the Zenith flagship, and its engines flickered and died. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Elena raised a hand to silence them. Don't celebrate yet. They're still dangerous. Grant, open a fleet-wide broadcast. Let's seal the deal. The comms crackled to life, transmitting Elena's voice across the battlefield. This is Lieutenant Commander Elena Drake of the Dauntless. The Primordial is crippled, and your fleet is in disarray. Your leader's arrogance has brought you to the brink of defeat. Stand down now, or face total destruction. Silence hung in the air as the Zenith fleet hesitated. Then, one by one, their ships began to withdraw, retreating into the void. The Primordial remained adrift, its proud silhouette marred by the scars of battle. Elena exhaled slowly, the tension in her chest finally easing. She turned to her crew, her expression softening. Good work, everyone. We've earned this victory. Martinez leaned back in his chair, letting out a low whistle. Didn't think we'd make it out of that one. Neither did they, Elena replied with a faint smile. Halverson stepped forward, wiping his hands on a rag. Commander, the reactor's stable for now, but we'll need serious repairs before we're combat ready again. Understood, Elena said. Set a course for the nearest friendly outpost. Let's get this ship patched up and prepare for whatever comes next. As the Dauntless limped away from the battlefield, Elena found a quiet moment in her quarters. She sat at her desk, staring at the small photograph of her family that she'd kept through every battle. Her fingers brushed over the frame, her thoughts heavy. The fight wasn't over. Humanity's defiance had won them a reprieve, but the Zenith would return. Still, Elena knew they'd proven something today, not just to their enemies, but to themselves. They were stronger than anyone had given them credit for, and they weren't going down without a fight. Her comm panel beeped, pulling her from her thoughts. She tapped it, and Jackson's voice came through. "Commander, we've picked up a distress signal from a nearby colony. It's faint, but it's human." Elena's eyes hardened. "Prepare to intercept. Looks like we're not done yet." She stood, the weight of leadership settling on her shoulders once more. Humanity's spark had been reignited, and as long as there was breath in her lungs, she would ensure it never went out. The bridge of the Dauntless was unusually quiet. The tension was a living thing, palpable and thick, as the remnants of the Zenith fleet drifted in the void like scattered debris from a once mighty juggernaut. Elena Drake stood at the command console, her shoulders squared and her expression grimly determined. The victory had been hard-won, but it was far from over. "Status report," she said, breaking the silence. Lieutenant Anders leaned over his station, his fingers gliding over the controls. "Damage to the outer hull is significant but manageable. Shields are holding at 40%. Our energy reserves." He hesitated. Elena turned toward him, her sharp gaze demanding clarity. "Critically low, Commander," he admitted. "We'll need to find a safe harbor to recharge and repair, or we won't survive another engagement." Elena nodded, her mind already racing ahead. The battle against Zalcor had drained them in every way, but now wasn't the time to stop. Humanity had scored a victory, but the Zenith Dominion was vast, and they would not take this loss lying down. "Plot a course to the nearest safe zone," Elena ordered. "Preferably somewhere outside Zenith's immediate influence." Anders nodded and set to work. The hum of the ship's systems filled the room, broken occasionally by the distant crackle of static from damaged communication lines. Elena descended into the war room, where her senior officers were gathered. The holographic map in the center displayed a tactical overview of the sector. Red markers, Zenith ships, still dominated the space, but a small pocket of green represented the newly invigorated human resistance. Seeing that cluster filled Elena with a rare flicker of hope. "We've sent a message to all surviving human colonies," said Lieutenant Vega, her tone brisk. "Some have responded with enthusiasm. Others, not so much. After years under Zenith rule, there's a lot of fear out there." "Understandable," Elena said, taking a seat. "But fear won't win this war. We need more than hope, we need strategy. Which is where you come in," said Commander Harlow, her second-in-command. "We can't sustain this on our own. If Zenith decides to retaliate with their full force—" "They will," Elena interrupted. "This wasn't just a defeat for them. It was humiliation. Zalcor underestimated us, but the next High Executor won't make the same mistake." The war room fell silent as her words settled over them. Finally, it was Lieutenant Chen who spoke. "Commander, what if we go on the offensive? Take the fight to them before they can regroup?" The suggestion hung in the air, bold but dangerous. Elena's mind churned. A direct assault on Zenith territory was unthinkable with their current resources, but a symbolic strike, one that could inspire the fractured resistance, might be worth the risk. "Chen," Elena said, "what's the most visible target within striking distance?" Chen's hands danced across the holographic interface, and a new image appeared above the table, a Zenith supply depot station near a neutral trade route. It was heavily guarded but crucial to Zenith's logistical operations. "Their Achilles heel," Chen said. "If we can cripple their supply lines, it'll buy us time and send a message." "Too risky," Harlow said immediately. "We barely survived the last battle. If we push too far, too fast, we won't survive if we sit idle either," Elena said firmly. "This depot is our chance to disrupt their momentum. If we plan it right, we can minimize losses." The plan took shape quickly. The crew of the Dauntless would infiltrate the depot using cloaking tech salvaged from Zenith's ships during the previous battle. A small strike team would plant charges on critical systems, while the rest of the crew kept the depot's defenses occupied. "We'll need a volunteer team," Elena said. "This mission isn't just dangerous, it's suicidal." "I'll go," Chen said without hesitation. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room as other officers stepped forward. Elena's chest tightened. She was proud of their courage, but the weight of their lives rested squarely on her shoulders. She nodded, her voice steady. Good. Prepare for deployment. Hours later, the Dauntless approached the depot under the cover of darkness, or as dark as space allowed. The crew was silent, their nerves taut as they waited for Elena's signal. The strike team, clad in black stealth suits, gathered in the hangar bay. Elena joined them briefly, her gaze sweeping over each of them. "This isn't just about us," she said. "It's about every colony that's lived under Zenith's boot. Every family that's been torn apart. This mission will remind them what it means to fight back." Chin gave her a sharp salute. "We won't let you down, Commander." "I know," Elena said, and for a moment, her stoic mask softened. "Good luck out there." The infiltration began flawlessly. The cloaking tech held, allowing the strike team to slip past Zenith patrols and into the heart of the depot. They moved with precision, planting charges on fuel reserves, communication arrays, and key power nodes. Meanwhile, the Dauntless drew fire from the depot's defenses. The ship shuddered under the barrage, but Enders kept them maneuvering just out of reach. "We can't keep this up much longer," he called to Elena. "Shields are down to 15%. "Hold the line," Elena said, gripping the armrests of her chair. "The team just needs a little more time." Inside the depot, Chin and his team encountered their first major resistance. Zenith guards, alerted by the growing disruptions, swarmed the corridors. Blaster fire erupted, the sharp staccato echoing off the metallic walls. "We're pinned down!" Chin shouted into his comm. "We need an extraction, now!" "Hold your position!" Elena's voice came through, calm but firm. "We're sending reinforcements." She turned to Harlow. "Deploy a second shuttle." "We're not losing them." The reinforcements arrived just as Chen's team ran out of ammunition. The combined forces pushed back the Zenith guards long enough to complete the mission. The final charges were set, and the team scrambled back to their shuttle as the countdown began. "Charges are live," Chen reported. "T-minus 60 seconds. Get out of there!" Elena barked. The shuttle rocketed away from the depot, barely clearing the blast radius as the charges detonated. A chain reaction ripped through the depot, illuminating the darkness with fiery brilliance. Cheers erupted across the Dauntless as the strike team returned safely. Elena allowed herself a rare smile, but it was fleeting. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Later, in the quiet of her quarters, Elena replayed the depot's destruction on her screen. It was a victory, yes, but the cost of freedom was always high. She leaned back in her chair, exhaustion tugging at her. A message pinged on her console, a transmission from a distant human colony. The voice on the other end was hesitant but resolute. "We received your signal. Tell us how we can help." Elena straightened, the weight of the galaxy still heavy but now shared. "We fight," she whispered to herself. "Together we fight."